Welcome, everybody. We are going to be working on the Unit 3 exercise here, and you will notice that I have the exercise documents available in two different formats here. You can pull it down through Google Docs or through Word directly. I do have it loaded up in Microsoft Word right now, so that's where I'm going to work on it. And of course, we will need to bring up MySQL Workbench. Just going to launch it right here from my taskbar. Once you get Workbench up and running, make sure to connect to the local instance of your database. And then if you have loaded up all the different databases that we've been using as examples already, um, you can check here under the schemas tab. So make sure you click on schemas. And then the one we're using today for our work is the classic models database. If you don't have that one loaded up, right, and that's possible, right, I want you to go back to the core shell and you can load that by going to the content page. And then way at the bottom here, under course resources, there is the classic models database. You would basically download that SQL file, open it up in Workbench, execute the query, and then it will load the database. If you already have it on the sidebar, you're all set to code. Right? So hopefully you have that available. If anybody doesn't, let me know and I can help you if you're not sure how to bring it up. Not a big deal. I'm assuming that everybody's got it up at this point. All right. Since we're going to be using this database and I have a brand new query window all set to go, let's make sure that it uses this database because you can see I have three others sitting there. And so I'm just going to issue a use statement. I'm going to say use classic models and put a semicolon at the end there. And I'm going to zoom way in, by the way, so you guys can see it. I know it can be very small if you're looking at a shared screen. Right. I'm going to go ahead and execute that query. And you see right away what it did, at least in the schemas windows, it expanded the tree. And it apparently is succeeding because I got the green check mark down here. So we seem okay. We're connected to that database. I am going to be storing all the SQL commands that I'm going to be running today in this one file. You might choose to put every command in a separate file. That's kind of up to you. The SQL file ultimately is not turned in, but if you want me to hold a backup just in case, you could always turn it in with your assignment. I don't think Brightspace will complain too much about it. All right. So the first thing I wanted to do is we are going to be playing with the tables in this database. And you know what? This is just me being geeky, by the way, but I like to see what tables I'm contending with, right? And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to come up here and I'm going to take a look at some of the key tables that we're going to use. And one of them is going to be the customers table. So I'm just like hovering over that line and I'm going to click that last icon, which runs a query, by the way, that shows you all the stuff that's in that table. It just basically gives me a dump of the table, right? And that way I can see what kind of information I'm dealing with. So I have customer number, name, contact last name, phone, yada yada yada, basic demographic stuff, and then here at the end, the sales rep employee number and the credit limit assigned to this customer. And it looks like there's a bunch of entries. And right, we should know now that we can run some code that tells us how many columns there are, but you can also scroll to the bottom if you can reach the bottom. Just a little thing that I did see in some of the homework is some people, when I asked how many rows are there in this table, they just counted them visually. And I guess when the table's small, okay, no problem. But what if it was, a few 100,000 records and you're like scroll, 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 right? Or even if you look and it says there's this many rows and a little status bar, whatever. What I'm going to tell you is you're better off checking that with code, right? And that you would look up that count function that we had talked about before. All right. So that's just to look at the information. Another one that we're probably going to look at here is the order table. So let's take a look at that one. Right, so you can see order number, date, required date, ship date, status, some comments, and the customer number. We already know that there's a little bit of a tie there between the customer number on this table and the customer number um, in the customers table, right? So those are common pieces of information. I'm just trying to see if there's any other tables that we're going to be kind of working with here. And you know what? I think we might be looking at the products table also. So let's just take a quick look at that. Once again, this is just to familiarize ourselves with what's in the database. All right, so there you go. So we got product code, name, line, scale, vendor, description, quantity, buy price, and retail. I think that's all the tables that we'll probably be dealing with here. So if we deal with others, we'll contend with that when we get to it. But honestly, whenever you're going to be writing these queries, um, it helps to know your data sets. You know, what's in these tables is pertinent. You know, not that you're going to memorize it, but at least to know where to find it. So I'm going to go ahead and I might keep these tables open here in those other tabs. You notice that when I hit those buttons, that it just opened other tabs. So for example, if I was to look at order details, which we might, hint, hint, you'll notice that there's some pieces of information that are kind of overlapping. And you know what? You can keep them open like this, and then you can just switch between them, and they're all set to go. Right. So that's kind of a helpful little tip. First thing, I'm going to look at, let's look at the first exercise and see what it's asking for. And by the way, if you're grabbing the Word doc or if you're working in Google Docs, and this is, the suggested way to do this, of course, is to put your screenshots and your code right inside the document, right? You can just take the document and do a save as. So here's kind of the first step of how to do the homework is take that document and do a save as, and then hopefully you have like a logical way to store it, right? So most of my students know that I tend to put stuff on my Google Drive, right? And it comes up as a drive letter G on my system. You have to install their software to do this. And then I have a fall semester. And then this is going to be the homework document. And if it helps you, um, you can put your name on it if you wish. You can name it any way you want. Um, so for example, if you want to put, I'm going to do last name, first initial, right? And I might even go as far as like solved, you know, or maybe I'm just going to say example because it's an example in my case. So I'm saving it. And now as I progress through the work, I will remember that I should save it. But Word does auto save, by the way, and so does Google Docs. Google Docs auto saves like every 2 seconds. Microsoft Word is more like every few minutes. You can set those intervals, by the way. All right. So we're going to answer this first question, but I am going to go ahead and delete that image because I'm going to put my own screenshot in there and I'm going to drop my own code in here. And it says display the order number and customer name of all orders from the order table and customers table. All right. So I'm going to give you kind of a simple way to start this. And I'm going to use this actually as an example for how to do aliasing. Not that this is the final answer, but this is a step towards the final answer, right? And in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in some comments here and say an example of aliasing tables for the first one. And maybe I would even go as far as going exercise 1. So you guys don't have to turn this part in, but I'm just going to give you a couple of examples on aliasing, and then we'll build the actual answer. So here goes. So the ask was order number and customer name of all orders from the order table and customers table. sort by customer name. So they're actually asking for a sort as well. So let's start with the select statement. So I'm going to say select, and then, well, how do I know um, how to alias this order number? And is a field name like order number really friendly? And I'm going to say no. So what if I wanted to just make that just look nicer? And I just do something like order number, which is how it's listed in the orders table. And I want it to alias as order no. Or, I mean, you could even do this. You could do order pound sign, whatever, right? That might look a little nicer. The other thing I want to do is I want to get the customer name, and then I'm going to display that as, right? So this is the alias it will appear as, AKA, in other words. And I'm going to say customer name. Now, one thing some people will notice is say, hey, you're using single quotes. Why not use double quotes? I could use either one. So I'm doing this as a point of like, which way should you do it? Well, whichever way you want, basically, right? So those columns will appear with those names, right? Then we're going to select those from which tables? Well, the orders table and the customers table. Notice I'm not doing any joining here, but I am calling on two different tables. So this is kind of another like step in the process to get into the joining. And then I'm going to order this by the customer name. That's going to be my ordering criteria. And here's my semicolon at the end, because I'm going to have multiple statements here. I just want this one to execute. You want to make sure that this is the one that executes, highlight, and then just hit this second lightning bolt here. And then let's run it. All right. So you can see I'm getting an error message here. And it says table classic models customer doesn't exist. What's it actually called? So what's it telling me is that I'm not picking a table with the correct name. And so that was not intentional, right? Sometimes they make mistakes intentionally to go, okay, what did I do wrong, guys? But this time I just mistyped it. So notice, first thing I did is I did not go into panic mode. I used the error message to help guide me. And I know that this is really small to read, but it basically says table classic models customer doesn't exist. So I fixed it now. Should we try to run that again? Let's try to run it again and see if it works. Okay, so there you go. Now I have output, and you can see order number, just the way I typed it, and customer name. So this is, once again, an example of that aliasing. This is, I'm going to call this reinforcement from last week. All right, let's kind of move on now. And once again, I'm going to keep doing comments like this. And this is still for exercise 1. So, and I'm going to call this the answer, for exercise 1. But this shows table aliasing. And that's using those single letter abbreviations that we talked about in the lecture. So the first thing I'm going to do is this time, because I didn't do this last time, right? So I'm going to select the order number, but from what table am I selecting it? So this is kind of a weird way to do this, but I'm going to kind of break my code a little bit, and I'm going to skip all the details of the select statement for a moment and focus on the aliasing. So watch this aliasing approach. When it's in a from statement, I can say from orders. All right, so I was about to make the same mistake. All right, so from the orders table, which we'll now call O, we're going to join it with the customers table, which we're going to call C. Okay, so this kind of seems like a backwards approach to it. But now when I come up here and type this line, it'll make more sense to you. So I'm going to say from O orders table, we'll grab the order number, right? And then we'll also grab from the customers table the customer name. Okay, so here I'm selecting these, same thing I selected before, but now I'm not aliasing the column names. I could, but I'm not. I'm going to show you the difference, right? So you'll see the difference in the results. And then if you want to alias it, you can. All right, so
I have a
now we have,
question.
yes, please.
Now, you assigned an alias in line 10 on orders, right?
Correct.
But in line 9, it already knows that O is an alias. Is that
Cor-
correct?
correct.
So things don't necessarily go in the order that,
Yeah, so here's the weird part of doing SQL code, George, and I think that's a very, very good question. All of this is considered one statement. So the order of the execution of the contents of the statement is not what's shown on the screen. So in other words, this statement is not a statement yet. It requires all the pieces to become the statement. Yeah, but that precisely, and this is why I'm kind of showing it backwards, is because our brains want things defined first before we start using them, because that's how regular programming works. Correct?
yeah, that's where I'm
Yeah.
falling down.
Yeah. And you know what? I think that's a great question and a great distinction here. And I'm sure people who will watch this in the aftermath will appreciate that too, because it takes the whole statement to execute to really define it. So what it's really kind of implying to you is how does it know that we're aliasing it as an O up here when we haven't defined it until down here? And the answer is when it actually gets processed, that is happening for this is happening first somehow in order for that to work. It's like the definition carries with the object that we're defining is really kind of the answer, right? It's not a complete statement yet, ultimately.
Okay, thanks.
Right. All right. So now we'll move on to the where part of the clause, right? Where we're going to say where from the orders table, we're going to look at the customer number. And now we're going to match it. Here's the matching part, right? So this is with the overlap that we're creating, where we have the same information in the customers table, and that's also called customer number. Statement's not quite done yet because they do want it ordered. And what do we want it ordered by? Well, we want it ordered by, well, the same as above, the customer name, but we want not just the customer name, but the which table is that going to be in? And well, it's not going to be in the order table. It's going to be in the customers table. So we preface it with the C and then paste in the customer name. And now the statement is complete. And so how do you define it? How do you use the definition before you define it? Well, that's not exactly how the technology works is really the answer, unfortunately. SQL, it is an interesting language because it's almost kind of like kind of writing English statements. And sometimes, like, for example, is a really good example of what I'm talking about. I will like say something before I actually say the thing that I want to, that explains, the thing that I'm actually talking about. And SQL works the same way. All right, so we're going to execute this statement here, folks. Let's see if it works. All right. Did it give us the same information as the statement above? It sure did. We were not aliasing the columns, though. Could we alias the columns? Sure. You could take these pieces, right? And you could throw that in here. And you could take this piece if you wish, right? This is not obligatory. Nothing said that we had to do that. I'm just showing you that you can do that. So I can alias the columns and alias the tables. Here comes the run. And notice now how we're controlling the output, right? And you'll have to agree, right? I think this looks a little nicer than the ugly column names. So with table aliasing and column and columns too. How about that? That's enough. Right, but that I would call that the answer to exercise one. You guys all good? Okay. Let's move on to the second question. And now let me show you how I would put this into the document as well, and because we didn't talk about that. So what I would suggest, right, you can do this two different ways. Um, this is probably how I would tackle it, right? I would put my code in the windows so it's nice and concise, and then I would probably with this probably take one screenshot. I think it can be done with one screenshot, and I would probably do it kind of like that, and then I would copy it, and then I would go to my document and I would paste that in, and now I can see the code and the output. Now, some people will just take the code and paste it in and then do a screenshot of the output. That's fine. I just want to see that what your code is and what it created. All right. I'm going to, since I just changed the document, Control S to save. And then I'm going to go to the next question. I'm going to get rid of the example image. And let's read the instructions, I guess. Modify the query in number one to use the following aliases. Okay, well, we kind of already did that, didn't we? Right. But they're asking us to tweak it, so we'll make it a separate query. They want us to say order no and customer name, right? All right, so I guess we could tweak that to make it match. So order no, and then I'm going to go exercise one and two, right? Because it is really. I just did too much on the first one, is what happened. All right, and it is a little different, so I am going to rerun that statement. Here goes. Right, and then once again, same procedure. Snippet. And that's what happens when you overachieve, right? You did too much on that first one, makes it look like I did nothing on the second one. And here's a little tip: if you want to move question number two to the next page, put your cursor in front of it and do Control Enter, right? And then I can put my image here. All right. Now, what you're going to see here is like the modifications to each of the exercises aren't really that intense. So the next one says, modify the query in number two to only include the customer name Bain Mini Imports. Okay. So if that's the case, right, do I really need to change this a lot? No, I mean, I could copy and paste all this code, and then I'm just going to do that for the sake of example more than anything else. And then we'll just call it um, exercise three. But for the most part, we shouldn't have to change much of this, right? I mean, what is it that we need to add to make it only select that particular customer? We're already joining the tables together. We're already getting both of the pieces of information. But here's the secret sauce, right? We're going to make sure the customer number in the orders table and the customer number in the customers table match. And we're also going to make sure in the customers table, my dog's coming here to visit right now. I thought it was my wife. Hi, Abby. All right, so we're going to grab the customer name where it's like, in other words, it's searching for it. And then we were given a very specific name, and it's Bain with two A's, mini imports is the search phrase. I'm going to argue the order by customer name is going to be irrelevant here, but it didn't tell us to change it. So we're going to leave that and we'll just run this query now. And now you can see we have three orders or four orders from Bain Mini Imports. And once again, I would do a screen grab here. I still have my snipping tool open. All right, copy that and paste that into the document as well. Another helpful tip whenever you guys are doing screenshots, and I know some of you are in the Python class too, so you'll get a healthy double dose of this advice, is if you're creating a screenshot and the text inside the screenshot is like way smaller than the text that you're typing in the document, that's going to make it really hard for me to see and grade. You notice how, I mean, the size of, this code is really close to the size of the text in the document, so super easy to read. I'm also not grabbing the whole screen. I'm just like zooming in on the part that I need. That's also really helpful. The output window is a little bit small, and I can give you a little tip. If you want to make your output windows bigger, you can go to your edit menu, go to preferences, and go to fonts and colors, and you can control the font size in each one of those windows. If you're in the SQL editor, you can do the control plus minus thing to make the fonts bigger, or your scroll wheel, control scroll wheel on your mouse. But for the other panels, like the result grid, I bumped it up earlier. It was set at 8, and I bumped it up to 10. If you want to make it even bigger, I mean, you can go to like 12 or something. And I don't think it'll show until the next query, but you'll see the difference. Right? For most of you, that won't be an issue, but you know what? If you're struggling to see that stuff, there's no reason why you should struggle. We have computers that can make fonts bigger, so make them bigger. It's just really as simple as that. So this is exercise number 4 here that we're going into next. Let's take a look at the instructions. And we should be able to finish this just in the nick of time, by the way. Once again, I'm going to move this down to the next page. Control Enter is the magic key code for that. All right. This one says modify the query in number 1 to include the order date from the order table and only display those orders with an order date less than January 1st. And you know what? This is like one of those instructions I'm probably going to forget. So I'm copying it. And this is a helpful tip also. If you use these comment marks, you can just like drop it in there. It looks like my word wrap's not on right now. I'm just going to manually push it down. But now my instructions are right there, so I don't have to hunt. Right. So let's go back up to number 1. And you guys, if you guys remember, it's also number 2. So I'm just going to grab the number 2 version of that. So I'm going to copy that down. And then I'm going to make my alterations. And it says modify to include the order date from the order table. And actually, here's one of the tricks there. It's the orders table. So don't type order in your stuff. So, all right. So I'm looking here and I'm going, okay, well, I still want the order number. I still want the customer name, but I also want the order date. So I'm just going to go O dot order date. Do I want to alias this? Let's not. Okay. Let's just, it didn't say that I have to alias it, so I'm not going to. Another thing that I'm just kind of point out, right, that the join can actually be implied. We didn't really talk about this much. We kind of did it and glossed over it before. But I can remove this command here and actually just do this comma because I'm really pulling from both tables, and this implies a join, by the way. And in this case, we're pulling from both tables, orders and customers. I'm just showing you this different way just to show you that this is also correct, right? We're still going to match the customer number and the customer number from orders and customers. Uh, we weren't okay. So
Um,
let's not worry about the ordering yet, but we have another criteria to add. So I'm actually going to add an and here. And Brent, did you have a question or comment?
yeah, are where and on interchangeable? Like, is there a difference between doing join where and inner join on?
Yeah, you know what? Conceptually, yes. Functionally, not so much. But that's a really good distinction that you're picking up on that. Does that help?
Yeah,
Okay. All right. So the criteria that we need here is the order date, right? And we need that to be less than, what does it say? January 1st, 2004. And if you guys remember this, you probably don't, and that's okay. The way that the dates actually sit in the system are year dash month dash date. So January 1st, 2004. And I'm putting it in single quotes, could be double quotes, doesn't really matter. And then are we still ordering by customer name? Sure. Let's do that. Let's go ahead and run this statement here. And you can see my output. Now, if you want to show more of your output, you can feel free and do that. But there's the output for that one. Did it actually show all the orders from prior to 2004? Well, I can see in the table that it output, it's got a lot of 2003 stuff, and it is ordered alphabetically by customer name, not by date, but by customer name. All right. Once again, screenshot, paste it in the document. You know what? I may as well just finish the process of doing that at this point, right? Since I've been doing it all along. There's the capture, hit the copy over to Word and pasting it in. All right. One last question, folks. Hey, and look, we got 5 minutes left. Perfect. Right. Timing worked out great. This one says display the product name from the products table, quantity ordered from the order details table, and a price each from the orders table for order number, whatever that is. Right. All right. So this one's a little bit more complicated. Um, So let's start to piece that together because now we're dealing with some tables that we weren't anticipating. Um, Order details, products, and are the tables that I'm hearing here. So I'm going to go ahead and start engineering this statement. And you know what? Um, the moment I change screens, and this will probably happen to you too, it's like, what was that? So take my hint on this, create a comment, take the instructions and drop it into a comment, and that way it's sitting right in front of you, right? So exercise 5, and the instructions are, and yeah, it's going off the edge of the screen. Let's not worry about the word wrap again. And I'm just going to put it there so I can see it, right? I don't have to go hunting. Creating some blank lines, and then let's go ahead and put this together. All right, so I'm going to start with a select statement. And yes, the aliasing will come later. So the P will be for products. And we're going to grab the, product name. We're also going to grab, all right, so we got one table called orders and another table called order details. I want to use O for orders, and I think I'm going to do OD for order details. So we're going to grab quantity ordered, another detail from the order detail table, which is the price each, or is that where we want it from? It says here orders. Okay, let's change that to an O. Correct? My brain wants to do it the other way, and let's see if there's an issue with it. So where are we grabbing these from? From order details. And notice the misspelling here, so try to get that right. Order details as OD. Notice how I say the word as, even though I'm not typing it, because that's how my brain is thinking about it. Products will be P, and orders will be O. What's our criteria? Oh, I didn't want that to autocomplete. Okay, so our criteria will be where the order, no, be careful on this, the product code in the order details table will equal from the products table the product code. So the same piece of information. That's our link, right? Another criteria will be where the order details order number is equal to the same piece of information from the orders table. Order number. And now we're looking for specific order. So you see what we're doing here. We're finding the product code, the order number, these all match, right? And we're looking now for a very particular product from the orders table. And that's going to be the order number and the number they gave us. And because this is numeric, I do not need quotes, by the way. I just type the number in. And that's the 10107. All right, that's what I have as a solution. Should we see if it works? All right, here comes the run. All right, so now I got an error. All right, let's read the error. An unknown column, price each. Okay, so it's saying it's not finding this. So I'm going to go to the orders table. And do I have, okay, I do not have that column. Okay. Is there a table that does have that column? So I was anticipating a problem with the instructions here. The order details table has that column. So I'm just going to change my code then as follows. This is going to be an OD. And so I'm going to say that that document is flawed. So this should say orders details, by the way. So you want to change your document, go ahead. One of the benefits of coming to class again is there's a typo in the assignment, and I'm showing you where it is. And we're fixing it. So now let's try to run it. See if it runs this time. Here comes the run. All right, looks good, right? Worked. Notice we're not reiterating the order number, but we are showing the contents of that order with this output table. So this is what they ordered. All right. I am going to go ahead and screen capture this since I went to all that trouble so far. And now we will, I'm just going to grab the code and the output, copy and into the document, number 5. There it is. And then it's all set to submit. So there's your homework completed. Once again, kind of practicing with a bunch of different things here. We didn't go like super deep into the left join, outer join. I will tell you that that stuff can conceptually get weird, right? The real big takeaways from this chapter mostly are the aliasing. I think is really important. Also, how to pull information from multiple tables. And then you can play with the different syntaxes to get the results that you need, depending on what information your situation dictates. And then, like in this scenario where we are still pulling information from 3 different tables, looking for one specific order and the products in that order. So let's see how that can get very, very particular. All right, that's the solution, folks, and this video ends here.